Hello.
It's Scott's birthday today,
I'm
and
old.
we're going to the Reynolda House Museum of Art. I've taken you guys here to this museum, and I've taken you to this park. It's sort of like the place in Winston where everybody goes. It's a beautiful park with shops and gardens and historical house where Reynolds Tobacco. They turned it into Reynolda Museum of Art, and we're gonna go see the Wyeth show, and we think it's just Andrew Wyeth. I don't think there's all Wyeths, but I'll show it to you. It's a gorgeous spring day. This is the newer wing, dedicated in 2005. And they're always showing you a video of what's happening in the museum and the history of Reynolds' family. And this is, I guess it's just Andrew Wyeth, the Kuerner Farm, the Eye of the Earth. There we go. Get you in light. Scott and I come here all the time to just walk the trails. And we've seen some amazing shows here. Last year, I don't think they really had anything that was that awesome, but they've had some great shows here in the past. So we're definitely excited to have this not too far from our house. I wonder if this is his house or the farm. Andrew Wyeth, 1917 to 1909. The Kuerner Farm in Chatsworth, Pennsylvania. I guess he painted this as one of his major inspirations. I can tell that they kept the lights down in this room, probably because these are works on paper, but to be honest, it's a little dark in here. I don't have the best eyesight, but I guess it's good for, works on paper. I can tell that there's some dry brush, but it's hard to tell, with this lighting. You really, really have to get quite close to be able to see that there are different layers and different textures. So Scott was saying that this was done when he was 18, so you can tell the sort of 17. So primitive, I guess, very simple, very sketchy, like an illustration. And then that goes in chronological order. This is an ink wash. I guess also it says tempura, so maybe there is different things going on. Like I said, we're not really allowed to get that close, and the lighting is kind of low. I've never done an egg tempura before. It does have a look of watercolor / gouache. You can see a lot of the different brush strokes. Trying not to get any light bouncing. This was done in 1938, and it's called The Black Hunter. It's hard because I can see the lights in my camera, but they're not that noticeable in person. Yeah, sometimes it's really interesting because it does say that, egg tempura comes from the Renaissance, and it's just very time consuming. and with egg yolks and distilled water and crushing minerals, and you know, it's just not as easy as oil painting. So you're curious why people would do it, but it does have a beautiful effect. It's funny, as usual, I don't understand why they don't have non-glare glass. I mean, yeah. So this is called End of Winter, Study of Winter, 1946. So you see that blue, unfortunately, that is the light coming from the hallway, which means it really doesn't have non-glare glass. But this particular painting is just the chimney of that farm. So it's very abstract, and at first I thought, is this a coffin? But you read it and you realize it's just a rooftop. Interesting, you know, I guess if you're going to do a series on a specific subject, then yeah, you try and see it in all different ways. This is Carl, the man who owned the farm, and this is done in egg tempera. Kind of ominous, the meat hooks in the ceiling. I love how simple this composition is, and when you look at the watercolor, you see that he just created this sort of shape, this abstract shape, and then within it just let the water do what it wanted to, right? And then they made the shape of the farm, the house, and just gave it the borders, but then allowed the water to create that marbleization, which is, I guess, you know, the awesomeness of watercolor. I mean, you know it's snow. You don't need to say much else. This is called Groundhog Day Study. And the cool thing is that the animal is just left as a pencil. I mean, I absolutely love it. It's in a way kind of an illustration way to do it, but it's captivating. I love that sort of mixed media effect. I mean, this is such a distinctive Andrew Wyeth composition. I mean, that's what's so fascinating with an artist, how when they are so unique, they almost don't even need to sign their work. I mean, just kind of what's left undone, and the color harmonies, the choices are so distinctly him. And I guess they're also showing you some companion pieces that maybe had done at the same time. Definitely what I would call tonal, really just sort of variations of browns and blues. I guess maybe a New England look, knowing that days are usually overcast, so they're not going to have pure colors. I love that snow effect, splattering the kind of the opaque paint on top of a drawing with probably a toothbrush or a fan brush. This is one of the later ones. This is 1970. Much more refined, I guess, more detail, more nuance, more color. That little kind of waterfall there. The distinctive cutout of the building, kind of silhouetted by that dark shapes of the grass. It's much bigger. This is a great lesson. So he talks about deleting windows from this house, meaning, this is just his imagination. There is a literal farm, but he can change it to serve his purposes. I've been reading the descriptions, and a lot of these pieces say that they have never been shown publicly before. I think I'm just gonna show some kind of quick shots. I won't go through every single one and talk about every single one. This is kind of fascinating though. I mean, I probably won't be able to help myself, but look at those dark trees through the window. Isn't that fascinating? Even though our eyes look at the female face. Oh my God, and I love her apron. Oh, I'm so into aprons. It is so fun. But, I mean, everything is so light, and only those little trees. It really does look like a children's book. We're stepping into somebody's imagination here, and it really is so fun. This is quite a famous one. It's just called The Kuerners, 1971. I mean, that wife's face just standing behind the husband, and what character. Her little kerchief on her head. In the distance, I mean, the composition is just incredible. Even the splatters on the wall behind. Nightcap, 1978. Wyeth considered this one of his most successful depictions of Anna Kuerner. He almost always depicted her with some form of head wrap, which she wore to reduce pain from the chronic headaches she is said to have endured for decades. Home Comfort, 1976. Betsy Wyeth titled this watercolor Home Comfort after the brand of the massive oven that dominates the kitchen. At the left, Anna Kuerner busily prepares a family meal. Homey details, such as the frieze of pots and ladles above and around her head, impart a cozy ambience that recalls 17th century Dutch paintings. The German, 1975. Wyeth asked Karl Kuerner to pose in this uniform he had worn as a machine gunner in the German army during World War I. Steel Helmet, Study for the Pine Barren. Steel Helmet depicts Karl Werner's World War I helmet filled rather incongruously with pine cones. Cornflowers, 1986. One of the final images of Anna Kuerner that Wyeth ever made. Cornflowers shows her hard at work at 87 years old, appearing to become another spirit of the Kuerner Farm before our very eyes. Dusk, 1978. Wyeth once said, "I often thought I would like to paint the house transparently and look into each room as if it were a series of thin membranes like the insides of a human being." We get a sense that the concept of the house is an organism and of the artist's all-seeing gaze. Dust Cap and Anna Climbing the Stairs, both in 1975. In the mid-1970s, Wyeth found Anna Kuerner a distinctly appealing subject for his watercolors. In both of these, Wyeth portrays Anna on the second floor of the farmhouse. Dust Cap depicts Anna in a rare moment of repose, while the other one, she is once again in motion, mounting the stairs from her sewing room to the hook room. Whoa, the hook room. Oh, jeez. The Milkroom Study, 1964. This is one of the works that has never been seen publicly. In a series of pencil drawings, Wyeth captured Anna Kuerner cleaning up the milk room inside the barn. This one doesn't have her in there, but it just concentrates on the essential elements in the room: the bucket, the white plaster walls, and the morning sunlight streaming through the window. Watering Trough, 1960. I guess in Winston-Salem's own library system, I guess they owned this one. So the curators looking through, trying to find work, found out that actually there was a whole bunch in Winston-Salem. Young Bull, 1960. This is a classic example of the watercolor method Wyeth called dry brush. When painting in this manner, Wyeth squeezed most of the moisture off the brush, which allowed him to paint with very fine detail. The artist used a long roll of paper, continuously scrolling as needed, which explains the unusual format. Oh, okay, so just like a big roll of paper that, which makes it so long and horizontal. He described this animal, which Karl Kuerner brought out to be painted at his request, as symbolic of so much of what went on at Kuerner Farm. This rarely seen watercolor depicts the Kuerner spring house. While a very common feature of the historic architectural lands of Pennsylvania, these structures are rarely given the dignity of a close-up. Built over a natural spring, their purpose is to create a cooled space for dairy operations and storage. And this work also has never been publicly exhibited before. Field Hand, 1985. In this precisely painted dry brush, Made in the artist's main studio rather than in Pennsylvania, Wyeth constructs an impossible view. Bill Loper, who had been dead for many years by this time, lived close to the Kuerner Farm. Wyeth shows him seated before the Kuerner Hill. The hook that replaced a hand lost in an accident rests on the log beside him. Loper was associated with the community around the African Methodist Episcopal Church, headed by Mother Lydia Archie. Fenced in 2001. They just say that this painting was done 68 years after haying in 1933. Shows you just his commitment to staying with this one place. Free Rein and Disc Harrow, 1996. So Kuerner Farm remained in the family as a working farm until 1999. The descendants of Anna and Carl Kuerner made the extraordinary decision to ensure its preservation by transferring the property to the nearby Brandywine Museum of Art. Carl Kuerner was diagnosed with leukemia in 1970, and his illness lingered for years. Often he lay in bed on the first floor of the house, where Wyeth began to sketch him. Spring. Late in his career, Wyeth embraced a strong strain of magical realism, and it was in this vein that he captured Carl in Spring. In a strange imaginative twist, he transports Carl's nude, recumbent form from his deathbed inside the farmhouse to a snowdrift on Kuerner Hill. I felt he was going back into the hills he loved so much. Snow Hill, 1989. Snow Hill is both fantasy and memorial, commemorating the iconic places and people of Chadsford that had occupied Wyeth for his previous 55 years. Gathered around a maypole, they grasped colored ribbons and danced in a circle. The lower left corner includes the railroad tracks where Wyeth's father, N.C. Wyeth, was killed in 1945, and the Kuerner Farm house and barn are unmistakable, just adjacent. Many of his most inspiring models follow. Carl Kuerner, dressed in the World War I uniform, holds the hand of Anna Kuerner. Anna, in turn, is linked to Bill Loper, whose prosthetic hook is held by Helga Testorf. You got through that fast?
Huh?
Wasn't it interesting how, messy he painted? I think in general when we see...
That's what I like about it, is the abstract quality.
Well, no, I mean, but just I think in books his works look very, very refined, but in person you see, messiness. You see mistakes. You see ripped paper. You see, painting over things, fixing things, It's... You always have to see artwork, in person. Yeah, and also how he exaggerated. Everything was exaggerated. Doors were askew. Everything was just a little bit Alice in Wonderland.
A lot of times he would remove the windows.
Yeah, no, just the fact that, the roofs were all weird, and they say how he started to get into, what's that called? Magical realism towards the end. You see it from the beginning too. Nothing was straight. So I guess this is, you could go see this Brandywine Museum. It's right next to where they grew up. So I'm sure you could go in and go to all the places that he did these paintings. Oh, and there's the stove from that painting. I love that one. Sometimes too, when I look at shows, don't you kind of go through them and go, which painting would you take home? Do you know which painting you would take home?
Yeah, I love that one of the cow.
I love that one of the cow too.
The small one.
Oh, the small one. I like the big one.
I love the abstractness of it, yeah.
I really loved the cow.
But I also love the one of the black man with with his.
Yeah, okay, I like that one too.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I love the cow, or I would take home one of the ones of the mother, the older lady, the wife of the farmer, either in the kitchen cooking or like the profile. Those were so wonderful. The way he painted her, what a character. Yeah. So this was fun. Beautiful show. We've been through this museum many times, and I think I've definitely given tours of this in these videos. But they have, or should have, a beautiful Sargent. But there have been so many Sargent shows that I kind of feel that it's going to be on loan. But we're going to go check out and see if it is. But they do change things up a bit, so you do have reasons to come in and check out different rooms. Here's one. This is the most recent Sargent that they got. It was a donation, but they should have a really big one. This is usually where the big Sargent would be hanging, but it's obviously out on loan. But they have a William Merritt Chase over there, so we'll go look at that. And beautiful, you can see down into the living room here. So pretty.
It's fun to pretend that you're
Yeah, they do tours that go from showing you places that inspired some of the paintings. It's pretty cool.
Allison, Allison's telling me she was her mother lived down there. She's not going there. And she said, she lived at Cuba. She saw the tree.
Oh, yeah.
When she got on the bus driver to stop. So you could
That's pretty good.
just
That
go.
was a whole
Here is another chase that we haven't seen here before. It says it is a collection of Wake Forest University. Now, Reynolda House is, I don't know if it's totally owned by Wake Forest or just the surrounding park, but hey, that's why you always go to museums and you know there's going to be new things.
Look at this one.
Yeah, I'll get there. It's nice. Sometimes we came to this museum once and they were so surprised by wasn't it John Alexander White? Like a huge one. I think it was on loan, and like a beautiful big giant landscape that was gorgeous. Total surprise. Who did this? Oh my gosh. So who owns this? Oh, Wake Forest. Okay. Well, that's cool. You know, these are some books, some paintings that you don't even see in books. That's great. Definitely, it's interesting how this is almost just like a study of greens and browns. Oh my gosh, how cool. So abstract in this foreground. The clothes are so simple. Like everything in the clothes, everything in him is pretty much light, and everything in the background is dark. That's how he's able to glow, so that there's no real darks in him at all. Sargent painted his friend Lawrence Alexander Peter Harrison while they were on summer holiday in the Simplon Pass in the Swiss Alps. Recently, conservation and X-ray imaging revealed elements of an earlier composition underneath the portrait that is thought to be a landscape featuring a waterfall from the Simplon region. This portrait remained in the Harrison family until the Haynes of Winston-Salem purchased it in 1976. So this had hung in the Haynes home and was donated to Wake Forest in 1990. Now, Scott and I have been to this museum multiple times, and we have never seen it. So that happens a lot. They rotate paintings, and oh goodness, ugh. Why don't they just keep these hanging?